The key to unlocking the scene portrayed in chapter 5 is found in the history of Israelite kingship in Old Testament times. During the early period of their history, the Israelites' only king was God. Without an earthly ruler to govern the people, the situation in the land was rather chaotic. At the request of the people, God eventually allowed them to institute a monarchy, even though God was their king. However, the Israelite king was required at his installment to secure a copy of the scroll of the law and keep it by the throne throughout his reign, Deuteronomy chapter 17 verses 18 to 20. His primary duty was to read the scroll regularly, obey it, and instruct people of its contents. His faithfulness to the covenant scroll would result in blessings for the nation. The scroll which the king of Israel was to govern by was the book of Deuteronomy, the book of God's covenant with the people of Israel. Placed at the royal throne, it functioned, in many respects, as the constitution of the kingdom, containing God's instructions for the life of the nation. It also specified the covenant terms and conditions of God's promises to his people. At the crowning of the first Israelite king, Samuel provided a scroll of the law for Saul, 1 Samuel 10 verse 25. However, Saul did not comply with the covenant scroll and was succeeded by David. The period under the reign of David and his son Solomon marked the golden age of Israel's history. David's reign became the model of ideal kingship in Israel. God made the covenant promise to David that his descendants would perpetually rule on the throne in Jerusalem. This concept of the Davidic throne is the background for the scene in Revelation chapter 5, where Jesus is referred to as the Lion from the tribe of Judah, and the Sprout of David, Revelation 5 verse 5. Elsewhere in the New Testament, Jesus is called the Son of David, who will sit on the throne of David and rule, Luke 1 verse 32 and 33. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. After his ascension into heaven, Jesus sat on the throne at the right hand of the Father. Hebrews 8 verse 1. Now the point in what we are saying is this. We have such a high priest, one who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven. Later in Israelite history, the covenant scroll became a symbol of installation upon the throne. By taking it, the newly crowned king would sit on the throne and begin his reign. At his enthronement in the temple, King Joash was presented with a copy of the covenant scroll and the crown as the royal emblem. By taking these, he was officially proclaimed king, 2 Kings 11 verse 12. Then he brought out the king's son and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king and anointed him, and they clapped their hands and said, Long live the king. The scroll in the young king's hand and the crown on his head entitled him to sit on the throne. The ceremony concluded with joyful acclamation by the people, as they recognized the king's authority and submitted themselves to it. To the people, the possession of the covenant scroll and the ability to open and read it demonstrated the king's right to rule and judge the nation. The scroll in the king's hand was his royal scepter, so to speak. However, for the king, the obligation to read and obey the scroll was a reminder that he was accountable to an authority higher than himself when exercising his power. The king was not the sole ruler of the nation. He was sitting on the throne of God. As such, he represented God to the people and his duty was to instruct them in God's law that was specified in the covenant scroll. In such a way, the Israelite king was to be the covenant mediator and guardian of God's law in the land. The Old Testament shows that the Israelite kings rarely followed the covenant book. Because of the kings and the people's disobedience, the prophets declared that the covenant scroll of the law would be sealed, Isaiah 8 verse 16. Bind up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples. It shows that the inability to read the scroll directly resulted from sealing the scroll. Sealing symbolically denotes a human inability to discern and understand the will of God, which is revealed in the book of the law and the prophetic oracles. After the exile, the Jews no longer had a king from the line of David on the throne in Jerusalem governing people according to the covenant book. The Jewish sources show that the Jews of John's day widely believed. On the basis of Isaiah 8 verse 16, that the scroll of the law, as the covenant book, was sealed at the time of the Babylonian exile because of the Israelite kings and the people's disobedience. It was at the demise of the Davidic kingship that the prophets spoke of the future messianic king of the Davidic lineage, who would be worthy to sit on the throne of David and rule. The people hoped and longed for the ideal king from the line of David, who would sit on the throne of Israel and rule with justice over the people. He would open the sealed covenant book and instruct the people regarding the will of God. It was on this concept that Jews of John's day built their understanding of the coming Messiah, who would fulfill the role of the ideal and true king of Israel. The Messiah was expected to be the son of David and from the tribe of Judah. The New Testament reveals that these hopes and expectations were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Luke chapter 1 verse 32 and 33. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David. And he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. And of his kingdom there will be no end.